Welcome to the iPad Possibilities Podcast, episode number 52, Weekly Thought, the death of the single-purpose hardware. Before we get this episode started, I wanted to let everyone know I tried to do this entire recording, this entire podcast from the iPad this time around. And it looked like I was going to make it for a long time. It was down to the last step where it utterly failed and collapsed. I purchased the application called Caster, which is designed for podcasters to record, to edit podcasts on the iPad, and it worked great. I was able to hook up the USB mic with the camera connection kit. Recording sounded fantastic, just as good as on the Mac. I was able to add in the music that opens and exits this podcast, and everything was going well. I could reorganize things, I could edit waveforms, and it was looking great for a while. And then out of nowhere, the app corrupted the file I was working on. It made it so the audio was unusable, and I'm not sure what I did to cause this, but the whole episode is now gone. It was the weirdest thing. It looked like this app's gonna work, this app's gonna do it, but no, it failed. So I'll give it another shot next week or the week after, but it looked like a great app. I was using it. It looked very powerful for what it did, and it looked like it did everything I needed except chapter markings for enhanced AAC recording, so you guys could jump around the different areas of the podcast. So that was a bit of a letdown. I was hoping to do this all from the iPad this time around, but I'll give it a shot next week and give you my thoughts as far as trying to do entire podcasts from the iPad using the program Caster. And hopefully some other apps make their way to the App Store. I'd love to see GarageBand for the iPad and similar apps, so I just want to let you guys know that before we get the show off and rolling. So with that said, I wanted to give everyone an update on the Saturday show. This Saturday, you might be listening to this Saturday morning. If you are, I will be at PodCamp, Ohio, Saturday all day in Columbus, Ohio is where it's held. It's a podcaster WordPress kind of conference. It's totally free. It's in Columbus, Ohio. If you go to just search PodCamp, Ohio, and you'll find it. And I will actually be doing a live show on the floor there with the iPad show. We're going to be doing a joint show. It'll be around 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, just after lunch. I'm not exactly sure the start time. All I know is we're going to be in the first slot after lunch. And if you go to iPadshow.com, go to their live tab, you should be able to follow along and watch live and interact with us on the chat room and all of that great stuff right there on the iPadshow.com. I think it's just iPadshow.com. And I'm going to try to get a feed to that on my website, but I'm not sure if I will be able to. So check that out on Saturday. And as always, please join us on Sunday for the regularly scheduled live show. So with that said, let's jump into the topic of conversation for today. And that is the whole idea of the need of single-purpose hardware devices anymore. Is the need gone? Has the iPad alleviated that need of these single-purpose devices? The Kindle was huge in its day. Well, I can say huge, but it was pretty big in its day for ebook reading. And the iPad came along, and more people are now reading books electronically because of that. Will the Kindle be killed because of this? Will the Nook be killed because of the iPad? And the whole idea of, do we need a bunch of different hardware devices when a single device could fit the bill? I myself personally have gone from using several iPods. I have a Shuffle, a Nano, and a couple others, but I have not used those in months, and instead am actually using the iPad and sometimes the iPod Touch for my iPad Nano as my iPod these days, my music player. I'm using cameras in the iPhone. I'm seeing these, iOS devices get rid of the need of all these separate hardware devices that we grew attached to over the years. And where this came to the forefront for me was when I was preparing for an article I was writing for app advice on filmmakers and apps that they can use. One thing that kind of startled me was, as I was listening to MacBreak Weekly, this came up as well, something called Movie Slate. There's an app called Movie Slate, and what this app does is it replaces the need for the clappers used in filmmaking. Clappers are before you begin a shot, you do that clapper and that sound marks the beginning of the scene. So both visual and audio can be matched up and synced together so they could be recorded separately. So that's what a clapper is. And these clappers are around $1,500 is what I've heard. So the thought of replacing that clapper with an application which costs around $30 or $20, I'm not sure what, but that idea is amazing to me. Filmmakers can instead buy a $500 iPad for possibly better functionality than they received with these standalone clapper hardware devices. And that is amazing to me. And the applications can be that much more powerful. They could have wireless sync to different computers that need access to that information. They could do all of these fantastic things that simply could not be done with this old antiquated technology of the clapper. It was a technology that was needed. It was a technology that was great in its day. But it's a technology, a device, a piece of hardware that can become obsoleted because the iPad can do what the clapper did, and it can add extra features to it which just could not be done. And this is amazing that the iPad can, become whatever the developer wants. In this case, it becomes that clapper. It could become that ebook reader, become whatever you need. And that can save people, it can save industries a great deal of money without the need of buying all of these expensive hardware pieces that, can become obsoleted now. We don't need to buy $1,500 clappers anymore. As a filmmaker, you can instead buy an iPad starting at around $500. And that is amazing to me. It is quite cool. It is quite amazing. I just trying to get my head around it as more and more of these hardware devices are consolidated and gotten rid of, and instead put inside the iPad, because the iPad is just an empty slate. It's an empty canvas where it can become whatever you need it to be. So there's other things like this. The iPhone has become a viewfinder for many. Viewfinders help directors pick out which lens they want to use, and the iPhone has become an incredible tool for that. And there's many other scenarios where the iPad now alleviates the need for paper, for different hardware things. And this cuts down the clutter in people's lives. It cuts down the just mass amount of things we own. And it can be all done now on the iPad. And it'll be an exciting year or two to see what kind of applications make their way to the iPad that totally get rid of the need of hardware things. I've already seen music keyboards that interface with professional notation software. I've seen mixing boards that interface with Macs. I've seen, trackpads that are now part of the iPad that interact with your Mac. I've seen all these things that were once expensive, great hardware devices that are now replaced by one piece of hardware. That is the iPad. And the iPad can now become whatever it needs to be. And that is incredible. That is something very cool, very just mind-blowing to me that I can now be using my iPad as my keyboard for my Mac Mini, my trackpad for my Mac Mini, and it can be actually used as a wireless MIDI device. It can be used as a clapper. It can be used as whatever you need to be. And that is the cool thing. And I think the death of single-purpose hardware is quickly coming. We will very quickly not need all of these expensive tools we once did. And that is really exciting. So that is my weekly thought. Just the death, the not having a need for all this stuff we once did. So that's the thought of this week. I think it's incredible. I'm still trying to get my mind around it, kind of grasp the potential of all this. But I thought I'd share this with you because I think it's profound. I think it's something that is slowly creeping up in everybody's lives and will soon encapsulate different markets and different industries. So I think it's pretty incredible, something pretty cool, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You can send your thoughts to me at iPadPossibilities@gmail.com and 209-542-iPad. Send those in. What are your thoughts? Are you getting rid of hardware that is now replaced by your iPad? Or are you seeing different markets that are now using the iPad instead of single-purpose devices? What are you seeing? What's your experience with cutting down the clutter and consolidating all down to the iPad? So what are your thoughts? Send those in. I'd really love to hear from you, and that'd just be greatly appreciated. With that said, I'd like to just mention a couple ways you can support the podcast. First off, you can become a premium member of the podcast for $2 a month. And with that membership, you get early access to all the promo codes. So as developers give me free apps to give away, you'll have the first you'll get the first to know about it, the first chance at them, and within the first couple months, it will literally pay for itself over and over again through free applications. Some other great benefits are you get the shows Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You get ad-free versions of the show, and a couple other great things. It's just the best way to support this podcast. It's just $2 a month, a cup of coffee, and that $2 goes a long way to support the show and keep it up and running and paid for, so I'm not going into debt trying to host it and do all the things I do for the podcast. Another great way to support the podcast is by purchasing the iPad Possibilities podcast app. That's an app in the App Store for $2.99, and you get the shows Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with that app, as well as a video episode every now and again. And the final way, actually it's just another great way, is by simply rating and reviewing this show on iTunes. If you just take 60 seconds out of your life and do that, that'd be greatly appreciated and would help others see the show and appreciate themselves. Before I leave you today, I'd like to just mention once again, please join me in Columbus, Ohio, if you're in the area, at PodCamp Ohio. I'd love to meet some of the listeners and just have lunch with you and all that kind of stuff at PodCamp Ohio. So please join me there. And if you can't join me, I'd love if you could watch the live show at iPadshow.com. Just check out the live tab around 1:30, 2 o'clock on Saturday. And also, if you can't make that, join us for the regular, typical show on Sunday, every Sunday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We do the live version of the iPad Possibilities podcast. So join us at the possibilitiesnetwork.com for all of the information there. So until Saturday and Sunday, this is Tim Chatton of the iPad Possibilities podcast.